Hey everyone, welcome to the Mobile User Acquisition Show. In the Mobile User Acquisition Show, we talk about how to use mobile user acquisition strategies to grow your app quickly and capital efficiently. The Mobile User Acquisition Show is presented by me, Shamant Rao, mobile growth leader and founder and CEO of the mobile growth consulting firm Rocketship HQ. Each episode includes strategies, tips, and pointers from the leading edge of mobile user acquisition that you can use to unlock tremendous growth for your app in a sustainable and capital efficient manner.
Our guest today is Natalie Drozd, App Marketing Expert. Natalie's specialization lies in App Store optimization and in growing apps through organic and paid marketing. In our conversation today, Natalie breaks down her strategies for unearthing the hidden levers in managing what can often appear to be a very opaque black box, Google UAC. She explains how to manage bids, creators, and audiences to drive performance even when there aren't explicitly clear ways to do so. I took a ton of notes from this episode that we were able to implement directly, and I highly recommend this episode as a masterclass in making sense of Google UAC. As a side note, as some of you may know, we had Natalie on the show a few weeks ago. For various reasons, we had to re-record that episode and remove the earlier version. Very many of you asked about the earlier version, and this is the revised and finished version of that much requested episode. Enjoy. I'm very excited to have Natalie Drozd on the Mobile User Acquisition Show. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm super happy to be here. And I think that you will find this podcast valuable and interesting.
Excellent. Yeah, we're thrilled to have you. Certainly because every time I've spoken to you in the past, I've certainly learned a lot and taken a ton of notes on how to run Google UAC. You certainly bring a very nuanced understanding of what a lot of people think is just a black box. And as I've learned from talking to you, it doesn't have to be a black box. So that's perhaps a good place to start. So is it really a black box?
I don't think so. Thank you for such a sweet introduction. My life motto is never stop learning, and knowledge is not useful if it's not shared. That's why I love to learn and I love to share my insights, because then we can multiply the knowledge we have. When it comes to Google, UAC campaigns are usually considered as black box because there are not that many things you can influence. But if you dig a bit deeper, it turns out there are things you can influence and that can help you to get better results. So I will not call it a black box, but it's not as superficial as, for example, running Facebook ads or any other social platform.
Yeah, and we will dig into what levers you do have in influencing and controlling the performance. Again, a good starting point would be bidding. So what impact does bidding have in influencing where your ads get shown?
This is a good start because when we think about marketing, we always think about money. Bidding is where money is. So when it comes to bidding, we all know that you can bid for installs, CPIs, you can bid for actions, CPA campaigns, and if you have Firebase, you can do ROAS targeting. But the structure is usually the same in all of those cases because the higher you bid, the more different placements you will get. The fact that you get to a higher valuable placement doesn't mean that's really good for you, but it means the competition there is higher. When we take a look at different placements where your ads can be shown and different inventory that Google has, we will see three main different parts. One of them is Google Play, it is Google Play Search and Google Play Browse. When you're looking for an app and you see the first two slots are usually ads. Or when you're just browsing, scrolling, looking through different apps you have or similar apps, there is also recommended for you ads section. This is also a very valuable part. This is one. The second one is AdMob. That's a huge, as Donald Trump likes to say, amount of users, because that's all the ads on websites, on different apps, and anywhere on the internet with all the applications that have monetization through ads. And the third one is YouTube. This is the flagship Google product because they are always trying to put it as one of the best things to have with a separate network. And those three are different things and they have different use cases. When you have bid, and your bid actually helps you to think and it helps you to prioritize where you will show. YouTube is the most competitive one, and if you bid high, you will probably get views on YouTube. Either it's a video or any auto-generated things. We will talk about them later. But the price is higher because competition there is higher. When you go to Google Play search or Google Play browse, you're only competing with other apps because the only thing you can find in the App Store, Google Play Store, so to say, right? When you are running ads on AdMob, there are a lot of so-called cheap impressions, but here you're competing with other, for example, e-commerce things which try to sell you things. It's also apps and also websites. So the competition is higher because the amount of player is higher there. And when it comes to YouTube, it's even more difficult because you're competing not only with apps, not only with websites, but with a lot of brand campaigns. And as we know, the top Fortune 500 companies really care about their branding, and they will spend millions of dollars just to make sure that people know who they are and what they do. And what is even more important is that on mobile devices, when you run UAC campaigns on YouTube, with the YouTube placements, you're also competing for desktop brand awareness campaigns because people usually don't care if it's a desktop or mobile version when they run brand campaigns. So coming back to your question, your bids can influence where your ad will be shown. And if you bid higher, it doesn't mean that you will get more valuable users. It will mean that you will get to more competitive auction, which is more valuable for Google, not for you.
Right. I like that characterization because you're saying, look, if you're only under app stores, there are just other apps. And very likely you're competing only with apps in your genre, right? If on Play Store browse and Play Store search, that's only your genre. On AdMob, it's wider. And certainly YouTube is much more expensive because the big brands consider it premium inventory. So that's not necessarily the most valuable for you. It's just what's most expensive. So why would it make sense for an app to even look at YouTube?
Brands want to have ads on YouTube because it sounds cool. That's my answer. And this is the place where all the big brands have their ads. One small distinction between passive marketing and active marketing. Active marketing is when a user is already searching for an app that needs to satisfy his or her need. This is the place about Play Search and Play Browse, and it's also Apple Search Ads on Apple. A person is already in the Play Store, it means that he is looking for an app. That's a huge signal that this person wants something to solve their problem. While AdMob and YouTube, it's passive marketing because people are usually disrupted from their main activity. When you're playing a game and you need to get a rewarded video to get one extra life, you don't want to buy anything, you just need to watch this video till the end to get your extra life. When you're on YouTube, listening to different music or just watching any show, you're watching a show, you're not here for ads. That's why the conversion rates are lower. That's why the impressions are higher, but the quality is not usually as good. So why people want to get in YouTube? Because it really helps you to drive brand awareness and at least awareness about what you do. You get a lot of impressions, and if your goal is to make sure that everyone knows about you, that's probably a good place to be. But you don't have to expect really high results in terms of ROI or LTV. Why? Because you target a lot of users and you don't know if they really need you or not, but they will definitely know about you.
Right. And it also sounds like YouTube and having a really broad campaign might make sense if you're looking for scale, because Play Store browse and search has relatively limited volumes. If you really want to reach large volumes of people, then you have to get to YouTube.
Exactly, because as we know, people who are actively searching for any type of X, they are searching only limited to them. You do not just sit on your Play Store or App Store searching for apps because you don't need them all of the time. That's why the amount of queries is relatively low. But people who are on YouTube using it for really different use cases each month. If you're really satisfied with your campaign and you see that main placements are play search and play browse, which are attributed as display network and search, and you really want to scale, YouTube is a good place to go because it helps you to inform new users about your app and maybe create this demand for your app, because you can just pick the demand with play search and play browse that already exists.
Right. So with this in mind, right, if you want the highest quality and volume isn't important, you keep the bid slow, you're on Google Play Search, Google Play Browse. And if you want more volume, you bid high, you get more expensive inventory YouTube. So with that understanding in mind, how do you recommend structuring campaigns?
First of all, you need to understand your why you need to run the campaign. You need to get more users, you need to get valuable traffic, or you need to scale. Depending on the different parts of the product lifecycle, you will be on different stages. And what I usually do is I do have campaigns for just main action. This is usually in-app actions. And that's campaigns that are usually on play search and play browse, because what they do is that try to find valuable traffic, and they are usually very stable because the placement is the same. We know that the amount of users that search for certain category is relatively the same unless it's highly seasonal topics. For example, apps for holidays or Christmas, different gifts. That's why CPA campaigns with main placements on Google Play Search, Google Play Browse, it's totally okay if you want stability and if you want things to go smoothly. On the other hand, if you need to grow, and this is also very important, if you want to get on YouTube, you either need to bid very high or run an install volume campaign, because it will get everywhere and cheap impressions are more likely to get on AdMob or YouTube. Impressions on Google Play Search and Google Play Browse are very expensive. That's why CPMs there are not that good. If I want to get on YouTube, first of all, I use videos, and secondly, I use install volume campaigns to get this impression volume I need.
Yeah. So thinking about, let's have a low bid campaign to get high value traffic and a high bid campaign to get YouTube traffic. Do you find that to be a good structure?
Not really, because everything depends what events are you optimizing for, what type of bidding do you use, and also what type of campaign you have. For example, you can run video-only campaigns on YouTube, and to do so, you have to ask your manager if you can run a video-only campaign, or just send an email to support if you don't have a dedicated manager. They can click something on the back end, and you will be shown only on the video placements. And in this case, you will not be competing with your other campaigns on Google Play Search and Google Play Browse, because there is no video, and your video will not compete with your app icon or title there. Running normal campaigns for valuable users on Play Search and Play Browse, and running video-only campaigns to get impressions on YouTube on AdMob with your videos or static images. And secondly, what I don't recommend is running different campaigns for the same event in the same location, even though people usually say that they are excluded because you're the same advertiser. From my previous experience, it didn't work. If you run, for example, 3 campaigns for the same event with different bids, only the campaign with the highest bid will work, and you will not get to different bids.
Right. So there can be competition. If you say, let me bid high on one campaign, let me bid low on another campaign, those could just compete with each other.
They will definitely compete with each other.
They will compete with each other. Got it. So you pick one as your key goal, right? You say, hey, I want value, then you just run the low bid one. Or if you want volume, you just want to run the high bid one on YouTube.
Not exactly. What I wanted to say, you cannot have different campaigns for the same event. For example, you can run an event purchase campaign to get impressions on Google Play Search, Play Browse, and valuable users. And you can run install volume campaign for the same location to get impressions on YouTube. Or, for example, if your ad has different monetization strategies. For example, you have subscription, you have in-app purchases, you have ad monetization. And
Right.
those use cases scenarios are so different that you see that those cohorts do not intersect. In that case, you can separate and run campaign for in-app purchase or for ad rewarded watch.
So you treat each behavioral event as a different kind of user and you target them. And within each event, you don't set up multiple campaigns.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Sure.
Google uses machine learning, so it uses signals from your app. It's not artificial intelligence. It cannot think
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
And that's why I also don't recommend to use events from the same funnel. For example, if you
Uh-huh.
have event registration and then event purchase, everyone who does purchase also does registration because he or she cannot do it in many cases.
Yeah.
That's why it's not useful to do it. But as I mentioned, if you have separate user journeys, this is the case
Yeah.
where you can run different campaigns.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, install volume campaigns always work.
Uh-huh.
And they usually do not compete with CPA campaigns. So if you have only one funnel and if one user journey, just install volume campaigns to get impressions and to
Mm-hmm.
be sure that the quality of traffic will not be as high as on CPA campaigns.
Got it. And still staying with bidding, if you have to bid conservatively, you said, look, you want to bid for maximum value. Do you bid your actual CPI? Let's just say you want $2 CPI, $10 cost per subscriber or purchase. So do you bid $2 and $10 in those campaigns? Or do you bid higher than that? Do you bid lower than that? How do you think about that?
Well, it really depends on your past performance. And what I try to do is to bid 10% higher than I want to get, because what I saw in my campaigns is that Google really tries to get below your target CPA. And if Google stays there for a week or so, then it's price to scale. Doesn't work always. It doesn't work now during this holiday madness. That's what I
Yeah,
want to say. But in the normal life, there are no crazy
yeah.
events taking place. That's how Google machine learning works from my observation. It's not useful to do it. These days, when there are a lot of advertisers with huge budgets bidding for Black Friday or for holiday season, but
Sure.
for example, February or March, where there's nothing extraordinary taking place, that's how in normal condition the bidding mechanism can work.
Sure. And I like how you characterize bidding as a way to be informed by the different user funnels and user journeys. Just to build on that, let's just say an advertiser has a relatively simple user journey. Say this is a subscription app, or this is a match three game with the first three IAPs being fairly standard. There's no multiple monetization streams. So it's fairly straightforward in terms of the user path to monetization. What does the ideal campaign structure look like if they are worldwide? Let's assume they are worldwide. How many campaigns do you recommend having? How many ad sets do you recommend having? Obviously, the ad set depends on the different apps, but how should an app start to think about it if they have, let's just say, a very simple monetization structure?
First thing I want to do is I don't run worldwide campaigns because you have to keep in mind that LTV may differ from region to region. But if the game is very simple, and let's assume that LTV is the same everywhere, and if only one language, that's also important thing to keep in mind, that one campaign for the event purchase, or if it's stream match game, that will be, for example, rewarded videos, and one
Mm-hmm.
campaign for install volume. That's small, but that's enough. And if you want to get more assets, this is what creative groups are created for, which means
Right.
that if you want to get different ads or different text assets or videos, you can always add more ad groups. Just keep in mind that it has to have some events there. It means that
Yeah.
you cannot have 100 ad groups and only 10 installs per day because the system will not learn. What I always try to keep in mind, Google is machine learning, not artificial intelligence. If you don't give enough data, it will not learn. If you give it enough and create the good circumstances, it will work well.
What's the ideal volume of events?
I keep the Google hygiene at 10 events per ad group. I know it's not statistical value, but at the same time, it is enough for Google to learn and to have users to optimize for. So 10 in-app purchases, for example, if you're running for in-app purchases, or if it's registration, that's even easier. Or if it's rewarded easier, it's much more easier because when you record every conversion, then you will have a lot of events to optimize for. And that's why it's so difficult, for example, to games with difficult monetization strategy with in-app event for $100 to optimize, just because it's not so easy to find the users who are ready to pay for it. And unlike on Facebook, you do not have audiences, or on Snapchat where you can also get audiences or localized. Here it's only machine learning, and that's its drawback, that it learns, but its learning costs. And the more expensive your events are, the more expensive your learning is.
Right. And presumably, if you need 10 events per ad group, you set up 5 ad groups. If you can get 50, you set up the number of ad groups accordingly. And how do you decide how to structure the ad groups? Let's just say there's a purchase optimized campaign or a subscriber optimized campaign. You say, right, I need to have 3 ad groups in here. What's the structure of what goes within these ad groups?
I try to use the semantic separation breakdown into different parts of the use cases, or tone of voice, or even the messaging I have. I consider Google like as a tree, and every ad group is a different branch. And you can offer different things in there, use different keywords in text assets, and also images or videos with different main idea or main call to action used as well. It really helps because, according to what I've learned, Google optimizes its audiences in the campaign on ad group level. And that's why we can see that sometimes CPI can be different on different ad groups. That's because with different creatives, they find different people. Surprise, surprise. And that's why if you a 3-match game, on one you will have just simple text at play this game, everything which is game related. A different one will be about use case, what I kind of like, are you bored at home? And the third one will be more about your brand if you're a popular 3-match game. So that's why different users will see the message that appeals exactly to them.
Yeah. Is there a risk in that case that one use case has very high LTV or very low CPA, and that use case gets all of the traffic?
It definitely can happen because, first of all, if you have 3 ad groups, at the very day or 2, they have the same amount of impressions, but then they start to optimize. And secondly, if you, for example, add a new ad group when the campaign is already running, this new ad group will be prioritized at the beginning. And that's why it can change the whole situation for better or for the worse, because it finds new users. So what I try to do is not to create too many different ad groups, because it will steal so-called traffic from other ad groups. But if I see that some of the ad assets are not working well, I will just change them in the old ad group. And it would also refresh the mechanism. So this old ad group with new changes will get new impressions.
Got it. Got it. And which brings me to asking you about how you think about running creative tests in Google UAC, because you did express the kind of constraints that are present. Chief constraint being you can't have 2 campaigns, and you also cannot isolate creative level performance very clearly. So how do you run creative tests if, let's just say, you have a new concept to test? You set up, let's just say, 4 ad groups, 1 for each use case. They're all performing well. And then use case A, maybe you wanted the gameplay or you want to show the subscription mechanic. You have a new concept that you want to test. How do you think about testing a completely new concept?
Well, that's a good question. There are different approaches. The easiest one is just to create a new ad group in your campaign. And as I warned, it may take all the traffic, and it may be more expensive than the old ones or less expensive. It's different. So it's tricky and a bit dangerous. So what I try to do is to test new assets in install volume campaigns on small budgets because they are cheaper. and you can see if any creative can get impression volume, because that's extremely applicable to videos, because from 20 videos, usually only 1 or 2 gets impressions, at least from my experience. So if I see that this video works well, I can add it to an ad group in the performing campaign, the different one, because Google saves kind of, especially when it comes to videos, that's not about text asset, that's about videos, the previous history about it. This is also very interesting on YouTube. And I know that was a kind of very provocative topic, that your people asked how videos on YouTube are shown and how they are prioritized. The thing is, if you get YouTube placements, you cannot actually comment under the ad. And if you have YouTube unlisted video, no one can see it. But sometimes Google has bugs on YouTube. And even though your video is unlisted, in some use cases, you can leave comments and it can play for you for good or for bad. But any comment on the video is more valuable than no comment. And what I mean is that it really sends very valuable signals to Google that this video is good, even though user may write, oh, such a boring app, something like this. And also a different thing, sometimes big brands run video campaigns with videos which are not unlisted, but which are included on their brand YouTube pages. One of the best examples is eToro. That's about cryptocurrency wallet. And they ran a huge campaign, and it worked really well that people were Googling for it just to leave a comment under that ad. And you may find it, eToro YouTube commercial, and you will see how many comments are there and how many of them refer to an ad. So if you run YouTube ads, if you want to get to YouTube, your video has to be really high quality, and it has to make user want to write something under your ad. This is exactly like what happens on Facebook. If users are engaging with your post, then it means that it will get more impressions than the one which is just, okay. Sorry for getting from the question, but this is like very important thing to say.
Yeah. The social proof matters as much on Google, on YouTube, as it does on Facebook. And it's not immediately obvious to a lot of people. That makes a lot of sense. So what you do recommend in terms of running creative tests is setting up a new ad set, setting up an install optimized ad campaign, run videos there. Whatever gets the most traction is most likely to get social proof and most likely to perform. So you graduate that, so to speak, to a main campaign.
Right. And also a different strategy that may be used is, for example, you may run a campaign at a location where the CPIs are low, but you can get a lot of impressions. This is like really popular case about testing creatives in India and then putting them to different countries, but running English-speaking testing in India, because the user behavior of people who speak English in India is really similar to people who speak English in other parts of the world when it comes to games. So when it comes to, for example, business apps or fitness apps, that may be different, because here we have different cultures, but games are the same. So this is a good thing to do. And if your video is working well, it has a lot of impressions on the Indian campaign, very likely it will get also high impressions on other campaigns. Again, this is my experience. Maybe it will not work for you guys, but in my cases, it can work. It works.
Absolutely. We do use a very similar approach on Facebook, which is run creative tests on India or tier 3 countries, and whatever wins, you graduate that to core geo. So I think that does make a lot of sense.
I like India because that's like a huge amount of population. This is also a very good place for starting Android apps, because a lot of devices, it's easy to find bugs and it's easy to optimize and see if it works well or not.
Yeah, right. And a number of games I have worked with have soft launches in India. Interestingly, I believe Philippines is another option that works well for these purposes. Certainly a large English-speaking population and relatively low CPMs, relatively low CPI. So I think that all makes sense. And with Google UAC, something that does happen is the disruption of performance every time you make a change, every time you add new creatives. So when you're running these creative tests, moving them into main campaigns from India or Philippines, How do you ensure there's minimal performance impact?
There is also one of the main Google rules. Google hygiene is not to make any changes more than once a week, and we strongly recommend it because, as I mentioned before, that's all machine learning. And if you make too many changes at the same time, the system receives too many different signals and it doesn't know what to optimize for. Therefore, we also have to keep in mind the weekly seasonality. People during work days behave in one way and differently during the weekend. And that's why if you made some changes and then you see that the thing is not working, I strongly recommend to wait because you have to see the whole cycle, not only 1 or 2 days.
Yeah.
Because the different thing that usually the first week of running a new campaign is not a good indicator because what it usually happens that as it learns, the performance becomes really better if you're running and if you try to run a completely new campaign in a new country. So in this time, you really have to wait. But if it's only creative testing, one test per week is good. And what I try to do is I did one change in one country and I dedicate myself fully to this location. The next day, I'm working with a different country group. Let's assume one day I work with the US only.
Yeah.
I can all the creatives figuring out is bid is enough, is budget needs any changes. The next day I'm working on Latin America. Then I'm working in Europe.
Sure.
Then I'm working
Sure.
in Asia. And it means that all their campaigns have enough of my attention and I give them enough time to optimize and to check if the new creative is gonna work or not.
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense. And speaking of focusing attention on different geo tiers, how many tiers do you recommend that an advertiser have? Let's just say they're worldwide, they're marketers throughout the world. Let's just say they're a subscription app. How many tiers should they have, and how many languages you typically recommend that target?
What I try to do is run one campaign per language, one campaign in the same time zone. It's important because Google has also 24-hour seasonality. And if you're running a campaign which is worldwide, it cannot clearly optimize at which part of the day it has to show ads to whom. That's why, for example, sometimes it works to have Canada and US campaign because their purchasing power is similar and time zones are the same. Something else for Europe, something else for Australia, something else for Japan or Korea, because A, languages, B, time zones. So everyone has the ads at relevant time.
Right. So you don't really combine, let's say, Argentina and Spain, even though they have the same language.
No, for two reasons: different time zone, different purchasing power.
Right. But if you have to have one language-based campaigns, would you recommend one campaign for every country in Europe, let's just say? Or how do you think about that?
No, I don't think that's a good idea because in this case, as there are a lot of small countries, your campaigns will learn very, very slowly. I think that campaign in English will be definitely good. And also, we have to keep in mind that if you run campaigns and you get Google Ads placements on Play Search and Play Browse, the ad will show your localized product page. So you will get the most valuable users in the language they use. And I always love to search for those cases because my phone is in English. My Google account is in Polish and my native language is Ukrainian. So I just love seeing Google ads in 4 different languages because they always try to give also something French or German. And Google uses the languages that are on your phone. And it's also very important thing to keep in mind. For example, in US, there are a lot of people who have Spanish and English, and that's why this is also a good audience. And sometimes you can run in one location campaigns in 2 languages, and it will work good if you see that there is a huge amount of population which speaks a different language. For example, Polish in the UK is a thing because there are a lot of people from Poland who lives in the UK. Or, for example, India with different languages there. And if you want to target people who speak Hindi, they will run Hindi campaign and not an English-speaking campaign.
Yeah. Is there a population size or audience size that you think might be suitable to target as context if you're looking at Europe?
hey, maybe just running Spain, that's 40 million people. You said that may not be optimal, but what's the ideal audience size or population size per campaign?
I can say there is no, because the only thing you have to keep in mind is the amount of events you're targeting for. And for example, you can run a campaign in Spain, and if you have 100 events per day, you're a lucky person. But if you're running a campaign for Spain within a purchase for $200, it's not enough to have the whole Europe to make the machine learning algorithm learn who are those users who are ready to pay 200 for a game. So it's not about the audience size. That's why you cannot choose an audience size in Google Ads campaigns, but it's all about the events you're sending. And a tricky part, the more you send, the better. But at the same time, a lot of developers don't really like to send too many information. But I think Google already has a lot because it has Google Play Console. It has your creatives, and that's why it knows how your app works. It knows your retention rate. So just take it as it is and try to benefit from it.
So what I'm hearing you say is within the constraints, which is say same time zone, same purchasing power, same language, or similar languages, have as wide an audience as possible so that you maximize the power of the machine learning.
Right. You have to know the rules of the game to play it well. And this is, I think, the most important thing with Google, because there are so many different approaches, but unlike like on Facebook marketing, there were not so many good guides how to run campaigns. That's why you really need to take into account everything you know and test it, and don't blame the machine learning for your mistakes if they happen.
And this is certainly a game that you seem to have mastered at a level that not a lot of people have. So I'm very, very appreciative of that. And just, Natalie, you shared a number of ways, number of levers that you can use to change campaigns and impact campaigns. How do you recommend that people keep track of a lot of these changes? Let's just say the creative tests or bidding tests and different geo tests. How do you recommend people keep track of a lot of this?
There are a lot of things happening. That's why you definitely need to somehow keep track on what was changed and when. And I have two different options. One of them is I just send messages to myself with different campaigns when and what change was made. So I have a very interesting monologue with me in Slack. And also I use data visualizers. And in those cases, you can also add timestamps for different campaigns to see it like, from different perspective. So you can see, for example, a timetable for the last month and add different timestamps when the bid was changed, when the creatives were changed, and monitor how CPI was like going up or down, changing during this time. And this why it actually requires a lot of, first of all, self-discipline to keep track of all of the changes, because sometimes it may seem very insignificant to you, but it turns out that everything went wrong. For example, you uploaded a creative which violated the policy, and that's why everything else became really very, very poor performing one out. And that's why if you don't know that this creative was uploaded this day, you will be looking for a very, very long time to figure out why the price changed.
Right. And it becomes so critical to know and understand what changes you made. Just because of the way the machine learning works, even the smallest change can trigger huge impacts on the algorithm and how it performs.
Definitely. And the changes we make from the side as marketers are only very small partial of all the changes that machine algorithm does from the back end in the season. But as we know, Google use, first of all, auto-generated creatives. It runs different creatives on its own. It changes placement, it changes text, and sometimes it may happen after like 100,000 changes per day, and you don't even know about it. Wow. And that's why you have to be patient and play with at least for a week to let the machine learning figure out if it can find a good audience or not. And you have to be really patient, and you really have to keep track of what you do and be responsible for your actions, because sometimes tests are successful, sometimes they're not. But as long as you can prove why this test was important and why and how you did it, and if you did it right, it will definitely pays you off.
Certainly.
Natalie, as you've expressed in this conversation, I think there's so much that marketers can do within Google UAC. Just there's so much intelligence that they can bring to how they operate what can seem like a black box. This has been incredibly instructive, Natalie. And this is perhaps a good place for us to start to wrap. Before we do that, are there other things that you feel like marketers should keep in mind?
First of all, I think be patient and don't stress too much if things are not going right, because there are not everything which is dependent on you. And second, reach out for help if you need anything. Managers from the Google side are usually very responsive. Google is top one for a reason. And if you have a dedicated Google manager, that's wonderful to ask them for help. If you don't have one, support is not a bad option, but at least it can give you guides and manuals what you can do. And you can also reach out to other fellow marketers who can help you if you need some struggles, because it can be a win-win game when you as a marketer get good results and Google UAC get good results on their side. We always have to keep in mind that the main goal of Google UAC is to make money for Google, and Google is only making money if we as marketers have good results. So that's why everyone is interested in running good campaigns, because if they are not successful, you will not spend money anymore. Be proactive, be patient, and reach out for help if you need anything. This is something that helped me a lot, and I'm very grateful to Google managers and also fellow marketers who want to communicate about running UAC campaigns. And that's what I recommend to you, because it was my way to understanding Google Black Box better.
Certainly, certainly. That's perhaps a great place for us to wrap up. Natalie, before we go, how can folks find out more about you and everything you do?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Natalie Drozd. I think there will be a link at the end of the product page. And if you have questions, just find me. I'll be super happy to discuss anything, because by learning and by teaching, we become better versions of ourselves.
Excellent. I so appreciate that. And I so appreciate your sharing, Natalie. Thank you so much for being on the Mobile User Acquisition Show.
Thank you very much for this chance to speak and to share my knowledge with you. Thank you, Shaman.
For more tips, pointers, and strategies from the leading edge of mobile user acquisition, subscribe to our YouTube channel right here, or check out our blog, rocketship.hq.com/blog.